Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We are going back to that horrible world known as the JRC, but before we do the usual disclaimers, I'm going to try to make them relatively short and sweet. And again, I apologize for the pillow in the background, but although the rash is finally healing, it's still there. And yeah, fun. The fun of having severely hypersensitive skin, right? Ugh. I just had to put more cream on it. This sucks. But anyways, to the disclaimers. If you are unfamiliar with the Stop the Shocks campaign or the campaign against the troubled teen industry, you're going to find all the pertinent links right there in the description box. Please, in particular, take note of the article written by NeuroClastic, a small non for profit started by autistics for autistics. In it, they interviewed over 900 ABA professionals in regards to the JRC's so called behavior modification program. The Judge Rotenberg Educational Center doesn't want you to read that article so much. They threatened NeuroClastic with a defamation lawsuit. They did not remove it from the website. NeuroClastic refused. You know the drill. Please read the article. Share on all your social media. Also included in there is NeuroClastic's public statement regards to the defamation lawsuit threat, as well as a link to their GoFundMe. We are crowdfunding just in case the JRC ever actually does see through with their threat. Trigger warning 1: when we discuss places like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center or Agape Boarding School for Boys, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips of surveillance footage of people with mental health issues and disabled people being tortured and abused. If you got young children present, please make sure to go ahead and utilize your headphones. Trigger warning 2: this channel is marked not for kids for a reason. We use profanity on occasion and do speak on dark subjects. If your child is 16 and younger and they are watching this, very obviously parental supervision is very much advised. All right, where we left off yesterday. Further, according to hearing testimony in an exhibit from Dr. Geller, for nearly half of the 87 JRC residents with GEDs between 2000 and 2014, the peak 12-month period during which they received the most GED shocks was after their first year using the GED at JRC. Contrary to popular belief, although autistics hate change, we can adapt when survival is on the line. If you want to know what I mean by that is we are very quick to realize what buttons need to not be pushed if we don't want violence visited upon our person. So, when the JRC calls peak of behaviors, and obviously the device is stopping it, obviously these kids are learning quickly on their feet, as the majority of us are forced to make themselves look. However, they have to force themselves to look so that violence is not visited on their person. The problem is with places like the JRC, they'll find other ways to punish you that is within their rules. Whether it is through their insane food programs, or whether it's at the slightest inclination they slap the device on, even if you have so-called been faded from it. Yeah. So the fact of the matter, but the behaviors went away as soon as it was introduced. Those of us who are survivors of violence can tell you, how did we survive? We adapted. We adopted a behavior and a persona that would be pleasing to the individual who is causing these issues as a way to try and stop them from their continuing their violence against our person. This isn't a solution though, because one can only suppress themselves for so long. This is true of neurotypicals the same as it is with us. You can only suppress for so long. Suppression is not an answer in regards to the more not so fun sides of my diagnosis. In fact, suppression is worse. Because remember, for those of us who had to survive, we now have adopted a mentality where we will stew and suppress and suppress. And when we can't no more, there is an absolute human equivalent of a nuclear explosion. It's going to come out. And after that explosion, at least for a brief while, all those behaviors that you thought had been solved come out, and they're usually more virulent, more dangerous than they had ever been previously. Okay? So you can't really call that a solution, particularly a solution that has any form of longevity. The only solution is getting yourself out of this fantasy land where you believe that a form of treatment is ever going to make your kid neurotypical or neurotypical like. It's never going to happen. As someone who's been well versed in faking being normal, I can tell you those problems don't just go away. They never will. The key is, as always, with any problem, identifying it, because you can't solve anything if you're identifying nothing. And no, identifying behaviors is not identifying the problem. JRC, ABA, for the love of God. Okay? Because though the behavior is problematic in and of itself, it's not the problem. And as long as it goes continued to be unaddressed, again, you can only suppress for so long. So again, there's no longevity there. Let's continue. Based on Dr. Geller's analysis of JRC data, the average time to peak applications was 2.7 years, and in some cases, the peak was not reached until they had been receiving GED shocks for 8 years or longer. For the love of God, folks, this is the barbarity, the cruelty, and the absolute insanity of it. If we just keep punishing them and beating them, they'll become what we want. No, we won't. We're never going to be what you neurotypical shits want us to be. Because our brain, to use the cliche, actually is wired differently from yours. Okay? It is literally physically impossible for that to happen. We're always going to be atypical. We're always going to stand out. That's just something you learn to accept and live with at some point in your life. Okay? Just wish the rest of the world would finally catch on, because God, we're tired. You know? If you are using a device for 2.7 years and it's not producing results, an intelligent, sane person would realize that obviously this device doesn't work. For 8 years and longer, and you still haven't figured out that it's a failed form of treatment, God, you're stupid. Viciously stupid, the worst kind. It is insane that the JRC gets away with this crap, because nowhere else within the medical model, with all its multitude of problems, would that be seen as sane. Even the worst of the medical model move on when it becomes more than obvious that a form of treatment isn't working. Okay? This is how backwards the science of JRC is. This is why I call it pseudoscience. And as we all know, I hate pseudoscience with the entirety of my whole soul. Let's continue, shall we? Dr. Blancush of JRC criticized this analysis insofar as it did not include pre 2000 data. However, JRC did not provide this GED application frequency data to FDA. According to this hearing testimony and exhibit, the JRC's own data show that for many individuals, the frequency of the GED shocks and hence the frequency of the SIB or AB is increased rather than decreased for some period of time after the GED began. For many individuals, the peak 12-month period was many months, and for some individuals, many years after the GED use began. This is not surprising to me. As an adult autistic, I can tell you, in the periods of my life where I am the most stressed out and fearful, the periods of my life where my anxiety has completely and entirely crippled me, I can tell you as a fact that every single time that has happened, all the worst traits of my diagnosis come out. Not only are they meltdowns, but the intensity of the violence that comes out of me during those meltdowns. It's intense, folks. Okay? I don't hurt any human during these things, but replacing over half of your kitchen is not something that I recommend. It's not cheap. Okay? I've noticed in particular for those of us who have a past of abuse being perpetrated upon us, when we go into meltdown, they have a bit more intensity. It's a bit more violent. It's a bit more destructive. And that all started when I was a kid with my stepbrother, whose actions against me I won't elaborate on, but would be unadulterated nightmare fuel were I ever to go into detail. Okay? That kind of fear weakens all the other parameters and safeguards we usually always constantly have around us. The wall is down. Okay? The wall is down. So all those things that you've been suppressing and hiding and pushing back come out at once and then is greeted with the meltdown tendencies, sensory issues go up. In my case, this is when I become vulnerable. I've been talking to you about the rash. It's not, everybody's like, ew, that's gross. There's a point to it. That form of stress can manifest itself in physical issues. To give you an example that would sound batshit insane had I not lived it, back when I was working for FedEx, when I was doing coding for customs, I was working at one of their facilities here in town, towards the edge of town. And the workmen were taking care of the other half of the building, reinforcing some of the old walls and different pillars holding the ceiling and all of that. That drilling and that sawdust, after a 5-hour period, had distressed my sensory issues so badly that I busted out into full body hives. As you guys know, over the last few weeks, I have been living with work's Damocles sword over my neck way more than usual. As I was continued to be told there was no way to get my numbers up in time. After I had that conversation, and of course tried the new product, you gotta love that. You see where I'm going here, right? That's what happens when we get stressed. So it doesn't even surprise me, even the smallest bit, that initially the behaviors would get worse because that is a stress response coming out of us. Okay? That much stress, that much anxiety, we don't have much energy for anything else. So all the walls we carefully craft a majority of the time to deal with the neurotypical world, they're not there. So yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. This casts additional doubt on JRC's assertions that the GED very quickly decreases SIB and AB and produces a lasting conditioning effect, as well as the ability of ESDs to achieve durable conditioning generally. The only thing that the JRC could actually be able to prove is it stops the behavior in its tracks when it's happening. They cannot prove that such a treatment can produce a lasting conditioning effect. And that's because, boys and girls, you cannot condition us into neurotypical hood. Okay? It has all the hallmarks of brainwashing, and it is as disturbing as it sounds. You're trying to brainwash us into behaviors that are completely alien. And it's not just the JRC, they're just the most abhorrent example. That's ABA. That is ABA. It's this idea that if we drill this alternative behavior into you enough, you'll use it instead of the other way, and we can condition you to be neurotypical. There's a problem. It can't be done. Because no matter how much conditioning you do, how much role playing you force on us, at the end of the day, our brain is still atypical and it's always going to be. Okay? That's the crux of it. And we're living in a time period where we're filled with a lot of old dinosaurs who can't seem to be willing to wrap their brains around the fact that you can't condition a disability out of someone. You can't condition someone to become a pre programmed robot. Okay? Because that's what this approach is. It is trying to provide alternative programming to replace the programming that's already there. But here's the thing, kids, we're not computers. We are human. You can't program us, especially not us atypical brains. Ask my mom sometime about how to try to convince me to do anything other than what I wanted at the time went. Or should I say how it didn't go? All right. Let's go ahead and close out on that, folks. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few we do get removed from time to time. You know the drill. Please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and please don't forget to utilize those comments. I appreciate your time. As always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. I'll see you again here in a few minutes. Bye bye, everyone.